Great. Good morning, everyone. I show 9 o'clock. Matt, can you push us live? We are live. Great. Morning, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting of the NICS Task Force to order. Thank you very much for joining us. We will be recording this session, so please know that we have begun the recording. The session will be available for public viewing on our website. We are also live casting this, so it is going out live also on our website at the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission. So good morning. Thank you for joining us. Let me start off by thanking you all again for your commitment and support of this task force. As you know, it was founded in 2012 as a result of a partnership and support from Department of Justice. One of the leaders of that work, Tony Colson, we'll have some updates on him, but he has retired from the task force. We will figure out a great way of honoring him as we move forward. But Tony has retired this year. He's going to be spending a bit more time traveling and doing some other work. But certainly the task force owes him a huge debt of gratitude and support for all of his work over the years. Additionally, we have returning to us Shayla Dillon, who many of you have known over the years. Shayla left us for a while, but she has returned back. She is a project manager with our team again, and we thank her for returning, and we look forward to the great work that she is continuing. With Tony's retirement and Aaron's retirement, we do have some vacancies, consultant vacancies here to support the NICS task force. If you have, they're big shoes to fill, but if you have any ideas or contacts of people who might be able to help us advance this work, in particular, continuing the work of the e-warrants, coordinating the rollout of that, supporting the planning and coordination work between our different partners. Tony and Aaron were terrific with that. Please refer them to us. Our agenda today, we will go over some of the accomplishments that we have, some of the accomplishments and successes that we have had over the last year. Talk a little bit about the work that's currently in progress now, and some of the challenges that remain, and opportunities that remain. We'll talk about the updates on the current projects, and then talk a little bit the remainder of the day on some of the projects that are in the queue that we still need to work on, some of the gaps that still remain, and do some of the discussion around that. So before we start, do we have Andy on the line? Not yet. All right. So one more update before we begin with the legislative updates. We regret we couldn't get a room. If folks are up here in Flagstaff at the Little America Hotel right now, we came in last night. The place is packed. We couldn't find parking. There was no conference rooms available, which is why we're not meeting in person here in Flagstaff. So I apologize for that. We will plan our next gathering down in Tucson in about 4 months. So we'll look forward to an in-person gathering in Tucson to bring the task force together there. And then we'll resume our regular cadence of Flagstaff, Tucson, and then back in Phoenix. Uh, some housekeeping. We're going to not have any breaks. We'll continue on straight through the agenda. If you need to leave, go ahead and do so. Join back in. We do ask that you mute your mics if you're not speaking. At any time, if you have questions, comments, go ahead and unmute yourself and jump in, or if you'd like, use the raise your hand feature and we will call on you to begin the discussion. But this is partly some information sharing, and then the rest is going to be an open forum where we discuss some of the gaps and hopefully come up with some ideas on how to move that forward. Okay. Any questions or comments before we begin? No? Let me start off with some legislative updates. So as part of the NICS task force, we were tracking several bills through the legislature. The series of bills were HB 2177 through HB 2184. These bills related to domestic violence protection orders and sentencing, CCW surrender, physicians and gun safety, storage and information to parents, firearm transfers upon conviction, background check prior to return, prohibition of transfer during a waiting period, strict transfer requirements, firearm purchase limits, one firearm per month, straw purchase prevention, universal background checks for FFLs, closing the gun show loophole, wrap-backs for licensed dealers, for CCWs, and then severe threat order of protection and storage. So HBs 2177 through 2184, none of these bills, and we've been tracking them through the session, none of these bills were successful and made it out of committee. But we will continue to monitor. They haven't recessed or adjourned, so anything can still happen. But it is unlikely that these bills, any action will be taken on these bills moving forward. We will continue to monitor that, and then next session, if there's any firearm-related legislation, we will certainly be tracking those as well. Any questions on the legislative update? If not, we'll move on to the other bill we were tracking is Senate Bill 1588. It is tangentially related to the next task force. This is the commission's data bill. This was to set up a open data system connecting law enforcement, jails, prisons, detention, parole, labs, all of the data, to develop a data sharing agreement and a system for collecting that data and presenting it back. That bill successfully passed out of the legislature and to the governor's desk. But unfortunately, the governor exercised her veto, and that legislation was no longer moving forward. So the SCMODS bill, the Open Data System bill, did pass out. Unfortunately, though, it was vetoed by the governor, one of the many vetoes that she exercised. So next steps for the SCMODS is to be determined. And as we get a firm plan together, we'll make sure you're updated on that. Now, let's move towards some of the accomplishments. I think we have Robert on the line. Michelle will be joining us as soon as she is able, but let's bring Shayla on board to give an update on some of the accomplishments that our successes around AZ Point, If you've taken a look at AZ Point recently, you've noticed that it looks very different. Speed's much faster, and the search capabilities have been enhanced. So, Shayla and Rob, would you like to go over the AZ Point updates?
Sure, I can start. So as Lloyd mentioned, you're off the hook, Robert. As Lloyd mentioned, a few weeks ago, we did some pretty significant enhancements to the system. Obviously, we've been working on these over the last several months. Of those include overall system performance. Many of our users, ourselves included, were experiencing a lot of slowness in the afternoon. So this was due to a memory leak in the system, and our technical team and our vendor worked to get that resolved. So overall, the system's performing much more fast and at a higher speed than prior. So that was taken care of. Servicing agencies, meaning law enforcement or constables, now have the ability to edit or delete a declaration of service. That was one of the biggest tickets to our support center from service agencies was, oops, I entered the wrong date and I need help fixing it. So now service agencies actually have that ability to do that themselves at this point. Just did a lot of overall user interface improvements, enhanced reporting. We did remove the dashboard. That was one of the things causing some of the system slowness as well. And it didn't really function well for service agencies. So we just removed that altogether. And we improved the reporting features so much that you can actually get the same information that's reported or was reported on your dashboard. It's just in a different way. And now they have the ability also to export those search results. So if they want to look at all the cases that don't have documents available, or everything that needs served, or, everything that has a plaintiff notification due, they're able to make that export into an Excel spreadsheet and work kind of those cases from there. Those are the big things. There's still a few items that we know for sure we want to tackle in the future phases of this. The work is not done. We are kind of letting the dust settle from, and if you've been involved in technical projects, you know that when we fix something else breaks, or we have to look at plumbing and connections with other courts to make sure data is still kind of going through the system as it is expected to be. So we're kind of letting the dust settle from this. And then in about a month, we're going to pick up and have another meeting about, okay, here's what was completed for this phase. Now, what do we want moving forward? And we have some items on that list as well. But I'll stop there and let Robert add anything he wants to add.
Yeah, Shelley, you covered most of what we did. And like what Lloyd said, the main thing is the way the look and feel of it seems to be hopefully a little bit cleaner, a little bit quicker also than the previous version of it. Like Shayla said, there was a memory leak that was slowing it down quite a bit. Working with the vendor and our technology folks, we seem to have that cleaned up now, and it seems to be running smooth throughout the whole day. It doesn't hit a point where it slows down at all. And also, like what Shelley said, is there's some other tweaks that are coming too. There's some other things that we are looking at to adding. May not get in the first round here, but it will come in a second round. Or if there's a bigger thing that needs to be taken a look at, we'll take it back for analysis and see what can be done to see if it's something that can be accomplished, or if there's a workaround for it. But as of right now, hopefully everything is running great for everyone. And the big thing also that Shayla said was the editing also was the big thing. So now the servicing agencies can, like Shayla said, update the date. Or whoops, I entered in the incorrect service. So let me go ahead and delete it. So it can be deleted also. So that's some of the things that we were trying to empower the servicing agencies to do, instead of having to wait for scripts to be run or process on the back end to run to catch up. Something to push forward to the servicing agencies, so that way they can take control of that.
And I would just add too, we've been getting mostly positive feedback from the service agencies. I think we tackled a lot of their biggest wish list items and requests in this round. And obviously, as we move forward and things continue to progress, we keep getting new ideas and ways to make it better. But for the servicing agency side, I've been getting mostly positive, lots of positive feedback. And then something, I mean, this group is probably more service centered, but a significant amount of work went into updating the petition portal as well. And that went live at the beginning of June, so a few weeks before our servicing agency updates, but big updates there, big improvements, a Spanish translation. The petitioner now has the ability to kind of track their order, if you will. They can log back in and see who it's assigned to or if it's been served. It provides that service agency information. So if they know that the defendant's address has changed, they could then proactively call the servicing agency who it's currently assigned to give them that updated information. So the petition portal also, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention this, but also a lot of work has went into making that system perform better. The Spanish translation was a huge request from the victim services community. So those, I don't know, Rob, if you want to add anything for the petition portal, but
Yeah. Again, how the look and feel of the servicing agencies changed. Same thing for the petition portal. It was redone. Some of the questions were streamlined, and some of the answers that they gave were streamlined also. So it wasn't all over the place, and it's more of a walkthrough now. In the past, they had expanding accordion sections where they'll hit a section, it expands and it contracts and the page gets pretty long and everything like that. With this new design, it's sort of a walkthrough. You finish a page, boom, you flip the next page over, now you're on a new page. You don't have a long stream of questions or anything that you need to take a look at. It's more streamlined, a little bit more, I think, easier to navigate than scrolling up and down a page trying to find a question to answer.
Great. So one of the big improvements that we had planned for and a success we want to share is the near real-time reporting. Now that is coming, I think, in September. They're still working out the details of that. Could you give us an update on what's happening there and when that's going to be live? Yeah.
We're working on the LPOR side also, and I assume that's what you're talking about, getting it to NCIC and everything like that. We're working on that to streamline that a lot quicker also. Right now it goes a couple times a day. More when we reach September, we're looking more of a near real time. So when it's served, hopefully within a couple hours, it's out there at NCIC also to get that in stream. And we also have the user interface with the new filtering and exports. So you have a little bit of reporting there, and we are looking forward to have additional reports moving forward in September that can be run from there. But those are the main ones that we're working on currently for September.
Okay, there was something in the comment.
Yeah, there was a question about is there a demo available of the new user interface? And I'm not sure if she wants courts or service agency. We did post a training for service agencies on YouTube. And I know the courts posted that on their site as well. If you want court specific training, let us know and we can get that. Robert may be able to point you in the direction for that.
Yeah, I may have to look at Kate or something, or one of our court service folks, but yeah, I can track that down. So.
All right. So again, near-time reporting was a big improvement. The reduction in time from when the order was given to when it's served and becomes actionable, and then when it's reported out so that we all can gain visibility on that was a key metric. And I think we're seeing improvements. We're going to continue to see improvements moving forward. Certainly the bilingual access was a big one in support of our plaintiffs. And then the speed, the search features, that was really quality of life support, making it easier for the agencies to use. Another big enhancement, I thought, an accomplishment I want to lift up, was the merging of the court portal and the service agency portal. Now, when as a service agency, you are looking at the same screen, essentially, or you're using the same portal as the court side. So if there's any conversations or questions going back with the courts, when they log in and you log in, it's essentially the same thing. Isn't that right, Robert?
That's correct. Everybody has the same link now. So yeah, so what the servicing agency sees and what the court sees, there may be some things that come back a little bit different, but no, the same portal, same link, same everything will show up for the court and for the servicing agency.
Okay. We'll give the discussion on some of the gaps or review of the performance measures in the next agenda item as we go through some of the in progress. Hopefully Michelle will be able to join us then. But thank you for that update. Shayla, would you give us an XML ADRS implementation update, and then we'll lead into our next agenda item.
Yeah, so we're continuing to work with counties to get this group is well aware, but the initial phase of this ADRS project, which we've been working on for a few years, was to get all the county attorneys on board. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the project, essentially, long story short, it's automating disposition reporting from county attorneys' case management systems to DPS so that everything is, the data is transmitted from the county attorney's case management system to DPS electronically, and they don't have to submit those yellow FDR reports to DPS. So we have a few counties that we're finalizing testing with, that being Cochise and Coconino. We recently had a meeting. There's been kind of some in and out. We've had turnover within the county, within the state agencies, and so we recently had a meeting with Yavapai County because they have been one of the implementation sites most recently that's been fairly successful. And so we had a meeting with Yavapai and DPS to kind of reconnect and realign on how ADRS, what we expect it to look like, how it should function, kind of the business processes for case or county attorneys to follow should they want to use this ADRS XML. As you guys know, ACJC paid for the development of that interface with the expectation that anyone in the state then, specifically with PBK is the one we've currently developed, but then anyone in the state who has that case management system would be able to use that interface. But what we've found is that counties do things differently, processes are different across the state, and so sometimes when we test these counties, we run into different things with different counties because they're using everything differently. So we wanted to meet with Yavapai and DPS and PBK and really establish these kind of standards or processes, if you will. Now that we have that out of the way, we're continuing testing with Cochise and Coconino. They're in final testing. We've got Mojave County. They are not on Prosecutor by Carpel or PBK, but we are in the initial discussions with them and their vendor. They have a different case management system, but want to participate in ADRS. So we're going to manage that for them, fund the interface development for that case management system. So once that's a little different. We can't just go right into testing because the interface hasn't been developed yet. But once that interface is developed, we'll be bringing Mojave County on. And then Apache County is now live. I think those are the big ones. Oh, Pinal is another one. They have PBK and are ready to resume testing so long as, we're doing the song and dance with resources and capacity across our agency, DPS, PBK. And so as soon as we get a breath from Cochise or Coconino going live, we'll bring on Pinal and then start the rest of our counties testing. We have several, I want to say 5 or 6 that are ready to go, just waiting for us to be able to take them on and walk them through that testing process. So we're getting there.
So one note, when we in the agenda, you'll see a reference to priority areas. This is referencing the improvement plan that we had developed over the years, action items. So 6.2, I think, is ADRS. You'll see that reflected here in the agenda. It's the second part of the agenda. But if you want to refer back or get a better idea or a deeper understanding of the priority areas, this is what we mean when we refer to that. And it's our ongoing plan as we manage this task force moving forward. So you'll see priority areas 2.4, active warrants 3.1, priorities 1.4, 1.8, that's ADRS. So that's what we're referring to when we talk about that. Let's bring in Amber to give us a little bit of an update on the sunsetting of the fingerprinting. I know we don't have the ability to get some live data, but if you give me a feel for, or give us a feel for how the ADRS transition is going, and maybe begin, if there are any gaps, maybe highlight that for us so that later on in this task force meeting, we can start addressing them. Amber?
Sure. So this is Amber with Department of Public Safety Central State Repository. So ADRS is going fairly well. We've made a lot of modifications on the DPS side to allow users to have better access. We went to a authentication process rather than using the web. So it's still web, but you have an authentication process, which it seems to be easier for customers to be able to get in and maintain connectivity. So that's been positive feedback from that. We have also gone through and made some changes. I've asked Mojave to test it. The girl from Mojave is actually on vacation, but what we've done is we've pushed out a new push to the sheriff's department. So when they make an arrest in make an arrest for any agency in their jurisdiction, if they make an error, they can go into ADRS now and correct that error. And what I mean by that is, let's say Mojave County makes an error on a booking for like Havasu PD. Mojave County can now fix their own error rather than pushing it back to the police department to fix an error that they didn't make. So that went into production this week. And we'll get back with you guys on how the testing of that goes with the real agency. So we're continuing to go down that route with a lot of modifications to make it more user-friendly. Historically, we've had about 50% of our dispositions coming in now through electronic means, not paper, not email, but through ADRS. So that's good because we still receive, in this unit, over 100,000 pieces of paper a year for disposition. So to have additional 100,000 coming through the portals is great. We signed off on Yavapai County Attorney. They are now one of 3 agencies that is solely electronic, which is Maricopa County Attorney, Maricopa County Superior Court, and Yavapai County Superior Court. They are now just submitting through their connectivity. So that's doing really well. That's why we chose Mojave or Yavapai as a agency to follow their programming, is what Shayla was talking about earlier. So what DPS is doing to get the word out there on a bigger scale is the DPS is hosting 36 trainings this year. And each of those trainings, we do touch on the ADRS system and how it can help agencies. And we're going to agencies and walking them through the process of using ADRS and how it can help them. We've been out to Peoria. I'm going to Peoria again this week. We've been to Pinetop Lakeside, to Tallis and all those agencies, and literally sat down with them and watched them use ADRS, Apache Junction. So it's statewide. And the 36 trainings, there will be a minimum of 1 per county. And Gila County is having 2 because they're split by the canyon. So we're pushing that out there and hoping that people understand that this is where DPS is heading, is paperless with proper training and proper connectivity. So that's kind of where we are.
Are you surprised at the rate of adoption or the rate of transition?
No, because historically we've had a lot of pushback because agencies didn't want to do web, which is them entering the disposition twice. So they'd have to enter it into their case management system and then into ADRS. And so a lot of agencies were reluctant to do that. But now that we have Parpel pushing out there and we have PBK pushing out there, and we have a lot of the superior courts now using, or justice courts using AJAX, that's helping with the connectivity.
Mhm.
But we do have problems with Ajax, which has been identified and is being worked on by the Ajax programmers, where the programming doesn't always make sense. And so we have to walk through those processes. The same thing was going on with Carpel is we would, Yavapai, one of the things that they were doing is if they decided to do deferred prosecution, they had told their computer system to convert a deferred prosecution into a not filed, which is two completely different things in the world. But that's where our auditing process came in and said, why are you doing this? This is not how you should do it. So they fixed their programming. So that's where the constant communication and all these trainings and stuff is helping us get the word out there. If we can make it work, you just have to talk to us about it. And with web, people are able to see exactly what DPS sees. And so they're becoming more encouraged by being able to get on and look at my record rather than having to guess that their system is working right.
Mhm.
So that if they do something through any of the direct connects, Carpel or Ajax, then they can go in real time and see if it took effect and if it worked in the system or not. So that's getting more people to buy in. And we're having a lot more success with those agencies. The big pushback we've been having is police departments. We sent out a letter to every agency in the state stating that what their percentage of missing dispositions was for 2021.
Mhm.
And we had a very large number of police departments respond with dispositions are not our process. That's only done by the courts. Why are you telling us this? So we've had a lot of communication about, well, the court can only report a disposition if they received the case. If they didn't receive the case, then it falls on the police department or prosecutor to tell us where the case stopped. And then they've been more realistic of, oh, okay, that makes sense. So we've been working through that process. So as we continue these outreaches and these big mass meetings, we've trained over 300 people already this year. I think it's going to get better.
Does the training facilitate the adoption, or is there still pushback because of the double entry, staffing shortages? What are some areas that we as a task force can look at supporting, or us at the commission supporting? Is it additional interface development for other record management systems? Is it how can we move that transition along, help move that transition along from paper to electronic?
So I'm not seeing as big a pushback as I was over the years for people not wanting to do double entry, because what was happening is that when they go into those other systems, if there's a glitch in the system or if it's been programmed wrong, then they're going to have to go fix it, which is taking actual more time than just verifying it was done right the first time. Mm-hmm. So we're not having that big pushback anymore. I would probably say the thing that could be done by ACJC to help us the most would be more integration with other types of computer systems. So right now we're only really working with, we're just getting the third type of computer system online. So we have Ajax and we have Carpel, and then we have, Shayla said it a minute ago, the other agency for Mojave. But there are a lot of other agencies using different types of programming. So that probably would be the best. But as always, I would warn on how quickly we shove, just because there's so many people on both sides that if you've got us involved in 12 projects, we're not going to be able to get everything done. So we still need to take it kind of slow and steady with 2 or 3 projects running at a time rather than overwhelming all the IT departments.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, Lloyd, for Amber.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've always envisioned this kind of starting at the county level and then moving to municipal level, but it sounds like there may be, I guess, is there a particular sector that would kind of give us the most bang for our buck, right? If we focused on, is it police departments or is it local prosecutors? What does that look like from the disposition side, Amber?
Well, obviously counties are going to be the biggest impact if you're hitting the sheriff's departments, courts, and prosecutors at the county level, because those process more records. So that'd be the biggest bang for your buck. One thing we're having a really, 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 really hard time with is prosecutors don't believe they have any process in this. The sheriffs or the county prosecutors, most of them have bought in and said, yes, this is part of our process and we're doing this. But as far as city courts, our city attorneys, those local jurisdictions, they don't believe they have a part. And so they're the silent part there that is not coming to these trainings. They're being invited and they're just not showing up. So they don't know what they're missing because they're not engaged. And when I've reached out and said, can you come? They've literally told me, we don't do dispositions, have a nice day, and ended the call. And it doesn't matter how many times I call them, that's always the answer. So, and they don't have a judicial board over them or a committee over them that says that they have to play nice and that they have to listen to us. Like we have AOC and we have other different people for law enforcement that I can reach out to and go, they're not listening, but I can't do that with the prosecutors. So that's a big fail right now.
It's good to know. And then just a thank you to Amber and her team. With ADRS, there's a lot of moving parts from our agency, the county attorney's offices, which is who we've been working with primarily so far. DPS, not only Amber's unit, but the technical side. And so then the vendor, it's a large working group for each county. And every time we reach out, Amber's willing and her team steps up to help us get testing with some of these counties. So it's a big undertaking, but just appreciate your partnership and support, Amber.
Thank you. And thank you for all your help, Shannon.
Yes.
All right. So as a task force, then continuing to move forward with the county prosecutors, we have begun engaging with eProsecutor. It's one of the other software vendors that work with the prosecutors. So we'll be working with them to build an interface. That interface will be available for any other installs that they have. I think we have about 6 others that are in the queue, 6 other county prosecutors that we can continue to support. So we'll focus there. And again, coordinating with you on the training, supporting you however we can. From the task force, let me open it up for any other questions or comments from the task force members.
We lost your agenda. So if you want to present that again, just so you know before anyone.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Amber. Let's move to, I saw Suzanne. One of the other priorities is active warrants and making sure rolling out the adoption of e-warrants. Suzanne, are you able to present? You had an update for us?
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lloyd. Thank you. I did put together a quick little PowerPoint. Get that started and I'll share my screen out.
Okay.
Okay, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so as I believe we reported before, the e-warrant project is integration between Ajax and JWI to be able to electronically issue and quash warrants from Ajax and send them real time over to the agencies who are utilizing JWI for warrants. And electronically, they'll send back real time if the warrant has been served or if it needs to be rejected back to the court for corrections. And so that helps keep us all in sync with each other a lot faster than it happens manually. So where we're at today, I'm going to just quickly show you where our current implementations are and share a couple stats, our planned upcoming implementations, and some of our upcoming planned enhancements. So currently, while we are only live in 12 courts, we just recently went live with Kingman Municipal Court. And so we have 3 different sheriff's offices who are live with us. So we've got Coconino, Mojave, and Yavapai Sheriff's Departments. The reason why I like to focus on sheriff's departments is because that allows many more of our courts to go live, or enables them to go live. So you can see, for Coconino, we've got 3 courts that are actively signed on to send electronic warrants. And then for Mojave, we just have the Lake Havasu Justice Court and Mojave Superior Court. We also have, for the Yavapai office, just Prescott and Yavapai. On the next few slides, I'll tell you some of the other courts that are eligible to go live, but they just haven't, and kind of talk a little bit about some of the challenges of, why they're not going live. And so anyhow, we've got 12 courts that are live, and so they are all reliant on, working with an agency who is signed on to JWI. Oops. So some of the courts that we're actively working with testing, we've done demos for, and JWI is moving forward with their implementations, is Apache Junction Police Department. So they are already using JWI. And at Apache Junction Municipal Court, I believe they recently had some staffing changes, and so they're just getting ready to move forward. So now that they've got settled, they're in agreement to move forward with e-warrant and implement that process change so that they can take advantage of this. Peoria Police Department just recently went live with JWI. They just went live, or they're just getting ready to go live, which will enable Peoria Municipal Court to go live. And that court has also reached out to us, indicating that they are very much interested in utilizing e-warrants. The Payson Police Department Apache Sheriff's Office is also in testing with JWI, and so that will help us work with the Superior Court there and all the justice courts there in Apache County. And then Flagstaff Municipal Court has also reached out to us to start moving forward. Initially, when Flagstaff PD was already live on JWI, Flagstaff Muni was struggling a little bit with the concept of the /S, or excuse me, the /S/ for the e-warrant signatures. And so I think they had a few judges that had to get over the hump of that. And so I think that they've made some strides since we first went live, and now they're ready to make a change. So some of the other places that are eligible that have JWI, this is kind of like our bucket of courts that we should be able to work with to push them to go forward if they're willing to make a change. But some of these courts that we've already reached out to, they're just not ready to make a process change. They're in our challenges, jumping ahead just a little bit, but some of our challenges is there's nothing enforcing the court to require them to go electronic. And so if they're short on staff, or they're not ready to make any sort of a process change, or comfortable doing what they're doing today, nothing that's forcing them, no meat and potatoes to say, hey, you've got to make this change in order to make this project move forward. So a few of them, it's just a matter of reaching back out to them at the right times, to get them to move forward. Just like Apache Junction Uni Court, they just had done a staff transition, and so now they're ready to move forward, that they've settled. So some of our enhancements, this is what we've been working with Lloyd on. There are 3 major enhancements that we've been working on. The biggest one that I think is going to encourage many of our courts to want to go live is the electronic warrant reconciliation. And so we've been working with JWI to send a list of all outstanding warrants that we have in AJAX. So not just those that have gone through the e-warrant process, but all outstanding warrants. And JWI is doing a comparison of those warrants to what they have in their system for outstanding warrants. So today, I believe the courts are getting a listing of all outstanding warrants, and they have to individually go through and reconcile the warrants that law enforcement has to what the courts have that are outstanding. So instead of having to review everything, the goal here is to only send back to the court those that have discrepancies. And so that's the first really big enhancement that I think is going to help really move the e-warrant project forward. The second one is today we have to, if a court makes a clerical mistake, even if they find it just 2 minutes later, they have to quash the warrant and reissue the warrant to make the corrections. So we've not yet worked out all the requirements wrapped around this and what will allow to go update a warrant without having to quash it. We still have to work out those requirements, but this is definitely an enhancement that's needed. And so these are the ability to send update transactions over to JWI to be able to do those sort of corrections. So anything on a warrant that's electronic today, once it's issued electronically, you can't do any updates. So if it gets rejected, you have to quash it and reissue it, or send it off manually. And so we're hoping to enhance that a bit. Last thing here is the manual selection of law enforcement agency assignment. We assumed that any citations that had come in, or when the case gets created, the agency who issued is the agency that's going to serve the warrant. And so we did a lot of programming to just auto select and auto send it off to that agency. And we did have some flexibility in there and some configuration. But what we're finding is that some of the courts really do have agreements with their local law enforcement agencies on who's going to serve that warrant. And so instead of our system deriving the information, the courts need to be able to select who the warrant should be sent to. And so those are the enhancements and projects that we're looking to move forward with. Lloyd, we've been in contact with you, and that will be funding coming from ACJC for JWI's programming efforts.
Yes, we've approved the funding for these enhancements, and I don't have a time frame from Scott. I think Scott's on the call. Would you be able to give us a time frame for when we can see these enhancements moving forward?
Yes. Hi, this is Scott from Pragmatica. We're still in the requirements and analysis phase on a few of these. But yes, I am hopeful that we can begin rolling out changes, again, based on other factors with AJAX and other changes that need to occur. I'm really hoping for the November timeframe to begin rolling out some of these changes. Our hope is, or we are also, as we're setting start dates, we're looking, getting started mid-August on the development effort.
Okay, great.
And I owe you a phone call too. Sorry about that.
It's okay. We're talking now. Suzanne, can you say a little bit about some of the opportunities that we might want to explore as a task force, some of the gaps that we're still seeing, and areas that we might want to form working groups around?
Like I said, on the electronic updates and clerical corrections, like we truly need to gather some requirements and work with the different agencies on what we want to allow corrections to be. What are those requirements on the corrections that we want to allow to go electronically? I would say that's probably one of the bigger items. Scott, not to put you on the point here, but or on the spot, is there anything that you might think of off the top of your head that we might lean on the task force here?
At this point, no. I mean, there's definitely people here that we will be consulting with heavily. Amber, Matt Freshour, Michaela Carlson. I don't know how many of those people are on here. I know Amber's here.
Yeah.
But yeah, we, all of our good ideas come from our users, and then we just take credit for them. So, we're going to be involving a bunch of those people. And I know Kathy had been discussing getting the e-warrants working group together again.
Okay.
As part of that effort, but she's actually out of town right now, and I know that she had some ideas she wanted to pitch about that.
All right. Well, Shayla and our team can certainly assist. Sorry, go ahead, Suzanne. You can continue.
I mean, really just, and Scott, feel free to chime in on challenges. Really, like I mentioned, there's no requirement or rules to force the courts to implement. Also on the JWI side, there's always a concern about cost and grabbing them at the right time so that they can budget ongoing. But obviously, Lloyd, one of our solutions for that was ACJC had agreed to fund the first year of maintenance for some of those that are looking to engage in using JWI. And so that's the current challenges. So really, we just have to pull together some focus groups and start moving forward with some of those enhancements. And that's really our next steps here.
Okay. Is there a will to look at requirements or rules around using electronic warrants?
I think just kind of like e-filing, I think that we do have some rules around, forcing like the attorneys to file electronically, but on the court side, if you have the means to send it electronically, I've not explored that yet, but I think that is, one of our challenges. We do have Adela on the line from Mojave Superior Court. And so, Della, do you have any input or anything that maybe you might like to share regarding a rule for requiring courts to go electronic? Like, I feel like Mojave has been very successful in electronic warrant transmissions.
I don't necessarily have, a suggestion for a rule. I encourage all the courts to do it. If you can do it, it's been such a great experience for us. And there were some growing pains that I think that we've gone through that other courts wouldn't have to go through. But it's really been a time saver. Our staff love it. Law enforcement loves it. Literally, a judge can say it's ordered that a bench warrant issue, and law enforcement knows about it, 10 minutes later, as soon as the clerk issues it. So, there's been not a single drawback or negatives. So we've worked through all the bugs, and it's just such a seamless process. And I don't know how best to encourage the other courts to go live with it, but we certainly have nothing but good things to say about it.
Thank you, Della.
So this is Amber. Just to let the people on the phone know how beneficial it is. It takes my staff, our requirement is felony warrants be entered within 24 hours, misdemeanors within 3 business days. It takes my staff on average about 48 hours to enter those misdemeanor warrants. And when they enter it, it takes them 5 to 10 minutes to actually do the data entry itself. But when it's coming through the e-warrant process, we're just double checking a couple of things, filling in like 2 boxes, and it takes less than 1 minute. And it's basically within a couple of hours of receiving the warrant. In addition, because the information is coming to us, there's less clerical errors. We're not spelling people's names wrong. So this e-validation process that we're going through, where the system is validating for us, is probably going to be more accurate, because there's not going to be those one-offs of I put the wrong name or date of birth or case number, because it's being populated for us. So we have found that to be a big benefit on our side. We, however, cannot make anyone get on it as a JWI user. We can't force people to get with JWI. I love them. Scott's my vendor, but I can't tell people that they have to use a JWI product. So we would have to be aware that there may be people refusing to use JWI and have another product.
Oh, Absolutely. And there's one thing I wanted to chime in here. We're also working on, as part of our validation interface, this was discussed in minor detail, but we are receiving a daily extract of warrants from Ajax e-warrants courts that we are incorporating into our NCIC validation process. And what we're seeing is, and I'm still putting together the numbers. Right now, we're just doing it for one court, but we'll be expanding this out to all of the other e-warrants courts. I see a really low hit rate as we're looking at data that was pre-e-warrants, just mapping between the data that was provided, from Ajax and the data that's been entered into ACIC, and I'm seeing much better. It goes from 50% hit rate or data quality for mapping warrants prior to e-warrants to over 90%. And we're still kind of rolling through those numbers, and we need more samples to do that. But it's been really encouraging, how we're able to streamline that process and how closely things in ACIC match the data coming from the courts post the e-warrants transition.
Mm-hmm. Let's open this up for discussion from the field. Anyone have questions or comments? All right, so some action. Oh, go ahead, Suzanne.
Okay, I don't hear any. Thank you, Lloyd.
All right. Thank you very much, Suzanne, Scott, for chiming in, Della for your input. One to-do list item for us at the commission is to find ways of supporting entry or reducing the barrier to use for JWI. Now, we had a lot of concerns about JWI early on, but it seems to be the best tool to allow a lot of our smaller agencies to get access to this. So it was a tool that the commission helped to design and develop or supported, and it really does facilitate. There's a whole bunch of other features that besides the e-warrants module that makes it useful. So yes, we'll figure out, we'll take that back and explore ways of supporting that, funding that, making that transition a little easier. I think there's an opportunity to communicate the benefits of this to a wider audience. So I know that in the past we had talked about road shows or taking it on the road, doing some sort of countywide convenings where we bring the courts and law enforcement and everyone together. I'll take that back as an action item for the task force to look at, maybe facilitating or supporting things like that. Suzanne, is there anything else you'd like to put on as an action item other than what we've discussed?
No, I think you have it covered. Thank you.
Okay, great. Let's see, has Michelle joined us yet?
No, she hasn't joined us yet. She's still.
Robert, are you able to give an update on the conditions of release?
Yes, I can give an update on that. We're meeting internally to gather the requirements, and then we will, once we gather the requirements and look at our internal team to make sure we have everything covered, we'll be reaching out to DPS so that way we can start discussing upon the message format to be sent back and forth. We're looking at some type of message format like we're doing with LPOR between DPS, but again, it's all preliminary. We're gathering the requirements right now, making sure we have everything covered, and then we'll reach out to DPS to make sure that we have the correct message formats and make sure that we're sending everything that needs to be sent back and forth.
Okay.
So that's about what we have right now. We had a couple of internal meetings with AOC staff to make sure that we got the requirements, and so it's about a matter of moving on from there. Then, so
the big idea here is to capture pretrial conditions that a judge would set, and to be able to communicate that to law enforcement so that it could be actionable. So it might be they're not allowed to be within 100 feet of this location, or they're not allowed to do this. So if there is a law enforcement encounter, they can look it up, dispatch can look it up, and they'll be able to see that, yes, there's some conditions that the judge placed on them, and they're in violation of them.
right, yeah. Oh, they're not supposed to be at the park that's here or what? So yeah, so they'll be able to see the conditions that comes back. Correct, with the query.
Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah. So a few years ago, there had been basically, I don't know, a task force or a working group put together to work on this. And we actually never got through all of the business requirements. So was there kind of a resolution, or did a different group meet, or because we weren't at the place where I thought
we were able
to have requirements, Robert. So where'd they come from? Because they're coming from the business as a collective. So I want to make sure that we understand how this happened, if it didn't happen with the collective coming together and kind of making sure we have things defined.
Right. Yeah. I know there was some structure of certain things that were going to be on there. All that I know is that we've been working with AOC probation, the probation group. Randy Baxter is the main one, and his staff. I know they compiled some things that we were looking at, and like I said, we're in analysis right now. So based upon that, it might be something that we have something complete and then have it reviewed from there before the final stamp or the final, yep, it's ready to go from there. But I'm just a technical resource for it. Randy is working with Michelle as a project manager for that. So.
Right. And I know you're the technical guy. I guess I'm asking from business requirement standpoint, how did we get to the point where you're doing what you're doing? And then what about all the other partners? I mean, I'm hearing that you guys are working with 2 partners, but what about the rest of the partners? And I just want to make sure that if we're going down a path, of course, that you have the robust requirements that you need in order to have something successful, or that right? So I kind of, what happened, and I don't know, maybe Lloyd, that's a you question. How did we get from the kind of aborted project that we were all working on collectively with several different partners and different representatives of the different kind of justice partners to where we are now? And are we confident that we have everything? Because when we left it, I don't think that we were all dialed in. And there were some fine points that were very important. I'm just going back in memory. It's been several years. There were several points that were very important legally, because if we do things and you can't legally enforce them, then kind of what's the point? So I just wanted and I don't know who else is on the call that might have been part of that group, but that's my kind of question. And I know, Lloyd, you don't have the people that came before you to maybe draw on, right? So,
Right. And I can take this back to my manager, also Michelle and Randy, to see exactly, make sure everything was. I can or what?
Right.
Or Lloyd, if you have.
Yeah, when we were aware, when I came on board, it was one of the projects that had stalled. And stalled for very good reasons. There was a lot of questions that remained unanswered or unanswerable. One of what we wanted to look at was from if we were, one of the questions we wanted to look at was how do we begin to capture the conditions and be able to communicate. So the technical problem of capturing it and making it available, we were able to resolve that and get our partners at AOC on board with the solution that we would be able to capture conditions from all courts, that we would use their parole system to funnel that into where we would have supervised release. So those defendants that are under supervision, which we would consider the highest risk, higher risk populations, that we would be able to capture those conditions and then transmit that to law enforcement. So from the technical side, that was what we were looking to respond to, is can we find a set of defendants or find a set of orders that we would want, that we would be able to focus on to resolve the technology piece. So the technology piece was solved by getting AOC's support to using their parole system to funnel the orders from the different courts through that, so that we can then make that available for query by law enforcement.
So I think that what you're saying is that the scope has been narrowed significantly, and it's just a very narrow set of pretrial conditions of release cases that will, or people that will be affected by this. And the larger scope that the project had in 2019 when we started has been either abandoned or kind of set as a different phase. Because, obviously,
Not abandoned.
Right?
We're
talking
using
about a very narrow set, right? Parole, felony, probation officer, things like that. It's pretty narrow.
right.
Which is fine. It's just so this group understands what exactly what we're talking about, and you have people who are new and people who were there 5 years ago when we started it or whatever.
Yeah,
So
no, I appreciate that. It is, yeah, and it's narrow. It's initially narrow so that we can. Our hope is that once we build this pathway, we would be able to open it up for all of the other orders. And use that same mechanism. It once built, we should be able to add all of the other orders onto that. So it is a narrow scope. It does give us a solution, though, for what we see as higher risk defendants. And then phase 2, which would be 2 or 3 years out, would be then to look at expanding that system to allow for additional orders to be entered.
okay. So just so we're clear, so this is something that ACJC is making the call on. This is not like a task force. You're not, obviously, you guys didn't bring it to the task force or whatever. So this is things that ACJC is just kind of making the call on at this point. Right, and that's what I'm hearing, right? Because that's not, it's a different way. It's totally fine. But if that's the way that it's happening, I just feel like we should all be clear and informed, because that's not how it started, which is fine that it's not how it's finishing. But I think we should just be clear.
Okay.
Right. Someone's making a call.
I hear you.
And it's not this group, so.
The who made the call to narrow the focus and then do what's possible. That was our team. That was my call. And what I'm hearing from you is that really should have been a broader discussion with the task force.
I'm not making any particular suggestion. I'm just calling out that it's different than the way we started, which is just different. And I wanted
Yeah.
to just clarify, right? Because I know
Yeah, no, I'll own that. When we came on board, I was looking for pathways to move this forward, and the project parameters and the goals were pretty clear. Some of the challenges were both technological, but also there were some operational questions on law enforcement side as well. But I think we're getting that clarified. But the only I guess the main change was the rollout. How do we then make this operational? How do we actually move this forward? I saw the opportunity working with AOC to do a smaller subset and then to use that framework for a phase 2 down the road that we would be able to fund and support. So with the project plan hasn't changed. My predecessor Mark was able to secure some funding. We were able to do a modification, not a modification, but a project plan adjustment that allowed us to at least launch the initial conditions of release system, and then negotiate that with AOC. So the question about whether the update and making sure the full working group was aware of the scope adjustments, I take that. I hear you on that. We should have done a better job communicating that.
It's no worries. I'm not challenging that it's changed. It's just to make sure, because what we all want is to have the quality, right? So if anything is built where we don't have the requirements complete or not looking towards maybe all of the pieces of the puzzle. For example, right, I'm looking from the prosecutor side. If something happens and it ends up that all this work gets done and you're trying to get someone prosecuted and we can't prosecute because it's not done in a way that kind of meets a legal standard, then we want to help support the effort to prevent it. That's all I'm saying. It's not a challenge, Lloyd. I promise you, it's in support.
No, right.
It's in support. But without the information, we can't figure out how to do that.
And
That makes absolute sense.
Could I add here too? I was a part of the 2019-2020 work group with Sharon, and we had a legal, a process, and a policy kind of work group for conditions of release. And I think Sharon's point, if I'm hearing her correctly, is that there are potentially open issues, particularly from the legal side, like who's the holder of record for a condition? How do we define no contact? Those are things that, regardless of the scope, if I'm hearing Sharon correctly, those are things that would need to be worked out prior to any implementation.
Great.
I think those are still open issues, is what she's saying. And I think we had a meeting in the summer, and then 2020 and COVID and all that happened. And then, the transition with administration and leadership, perhaps we dropped the ball on keeping the groups updated, and perhaps some clarification is needed on the direction of, are we going to continue engaging those groups, or is it now a siloed thing with AOC and DPS and ECJC? That's what I'm hearing.
Okay. No, let's continue to, I understand now. And Shayla, I'll work with you to reconvene the policy legal group and provide an update from them and make sure that as we develop these requirements, that we're in alignment. We should also bring the other groups together to provide an update. So good suggestion.
We're going to need our legal eagle Sharon to help us through some of these things.
Yeah, we'll make sure that. Great.
It's all a team. And I'm going to try to remember some of the things, like you said, it's been a while. And
I think we might have a list of the issues in which, because I remember we still had Aaron at that time as well, and he had really taken great notes, if I remember correctly. I'll try to find the document for each committee or each work group of what those kind of standing issues were, and the open issues still, I believe. So I'll try to find that and see if we can maybe send that out, if you'd be okay with that, Lloyd.
Yes, let's do that. Okay. Anything else on conditions of release? Comments or questions? And thank you, Sharon.
Don't you love the reactions? They're fun.
Let's go to fingerprint. Just a brief update. We have some of the units that were initially deployed for in the courts to do the verification are at end of life. We received a request. We put in a grant for end of life unit replacement. We're waiting on a response from that, but we are now looking at, I guess, unit replacements for that. I don't know if there's any other issues or concerns with the units other than the replacement. Kay or someone else from the courts, do you have any question or comments on the fingerprint piece? Sorry, this is another one where a lot of work happened that we were not able to transition from Mark to me very well. So hearing none. All right, so for 2FID, we are moving forward with unit replacements. Let's move on. All right, next agenda item. Some response from the strategic planning. Last year, this time we held a strategic planning workshop. We redid it. We did another round at the Capitol a few months later. Looked at our action plan, opportunities for improvement, broad range. Are there things that need to be happening that we're not in support of? So a couple of big items that came out of that, recommendations. We have not put a working group around. One was maybe something that needs to happen at the county level, but county data reconciliation working groups. I think the Yavapai, Mojave County examples of them meeting together to weekly or monthly meetings to reconcile data that's being transmitted back and forth, that was proven a success. There was suggestions that could be replicated in other areas. And then staffing issues was a huge issue for many of our partners, retention strategies for data management personnel, and a discussion around that. Though we have not developed action plans based on that, and I think we will work with you all to see. The county data working groups seem to be localized, so I'm not sure there's going to be task force efforts directed there unless I hear otherwise from you folks. But retention strategies, recruitment, one of the things we've tried to do is provide over here at the commission is overtime dollars. And what we're hearing is back from agencies is, we can't use up all the overtime dollars. There's just a more systemic challenge of getting data personnel, data management personnel, records clerks and whatnot, retaining them. And so this is a statewide issue. This is a larger issue than just this task force. I think what we'll do is we'll call a working group together on this to see where, if it's where we would want to target, if it's administrative strategy, is it whatever the strategies, best strategies for addressing this. But we do have a shortage that's impacting our records improvement project. But it's a bigger shortage. It's a bigger issue than just NICS. There was no additional items added to our working plan, our action plan. Excuse me. So we'll continue working through that, and then certainly looking at supporting recruitment and retention for data personnel. The other outstanding area that still hasn't been resolved is the mental health pickup orders, both standardization, and there was a question early on about the adding that to AZ Point or one of the other systems. I wonder if someone from the task force can give us an update on the discussions that were had previously about standardizing the pickup orders, where that stands, or the opportunity for that, where that would sit, and who should be best facilitating that, and then any discussions on the AZ Point side. So Shayla, I don't know if you recall some of the discussions, or if Sharon or Robert, anyone else that were involved with that could provide some background.
That's been a lot of years. I don't remember the scope of the mental health pickup orders. I do remember we've talked about it several times, and then particularly Sergeant Jason Winsky, I think, but I don't see him on, from Tucson PD, has briefed us on this issue before, but I apologize, I don't remember the specifics. I can always go back and review minutes or the meeting recording, but I don't know if any of the other members have anything to add.
I don't recall, like you said, Sheila. I think it was the way back when, and I haven't heard any updates or any new things about it recently.
Well, what was the issue around the standardization? So the mental health pickup orders, these are the 72-hour holds, right? So a judge would order a hold on a defendant, and then requiring them to be, for their safety, to be held in some sort of facility on a watch, a 72-hour, what I remember was called a 72-hour hold. So that's what we're talking about here, right? And so is the standardization standardizing the order, standardizing, what was the earlier discussions on that? I want to make sure that, again, this is one of the items that has been persistently part of our action plan, that I don't see plans in place on how do we move that forward. And if we get it to a point where it can be resolved, how we get that into an actionable AZ Point or something else. Yes, Diane, go ahead.
I'm here in Pima County, so Jason's kind of a hometown guy. One of the challenges has always been getting the piece of paper from the court with the signed order in law enforcement's hands. So if I recall, it just all stems back to, whatever we can do to shorten down that time between the time the judge signs the order and getting it in law enforcement's hands, so they can, go out and effectuate the, the contact with the person involved, when it's something in a critical or chronic situation. So, once we, sort of like you said before, once we've got that pipeline in place, can we use it for other things like the order of protection, how it goes out to the service agency? Is that something we can piggyback on for other purposes of similar nature?
Okay, so we would need a way for the judges to enter that so that law enforcement can then receive a signed order, an executable order, and then make that encounter. Now,
and I really don't recall if it ever got any further than conceptual, if we can do it for one thing, can we do it for more? Or if there was going to be another, maybe it piggybacks off the e-warrant project instead, rather than AZ Point.
Yeah.
all right. So, are there, again, recalling my, okay. But so no formal planning, no formal program plan has been started on that. I'm seeing some nods. All right. So we'll take that as a task item for this upcoming year, is to put a working group to develop a survey or survey the environmental scan, get a better understanding of the reality that we're facing, and then look at how do we then, either through policy, process, or technology, build this in. Is that a good task assignment back to the group then? Okay. Yeah, we'll take that on. That makes sense. All right, and then we will put a call out for a working group, and we'll make sure that gets reported back to in November when we meet again. All right, the other item I wanted to bring up was the full fingerprint sentencing gap linked to criminal history. That is, again, a issue that keeps popping up. And apparently, I don't have a lot of details on that. I want to open that up for discussion. Sentencing gap linked to criminal history.
So this is Amber. That's probably with me. So it's getting better. We call that the gap filler process. So we successfully worked with DOC over the past couple of years, and DOC has, if the subject is sentenced to prison time, DOC is doing a preemptive search before the subject arrives at prison. And if they can't find a criminal record for them, then they notify the sheriff's department to fingerprint before processing over to the DOC side. One thing we have noticed recently is that we have a big gap when it comes to the private prisons, particularly the one in Pinal County. They're doing things where the subject is incarcerated and then commits a crime within their facility and is prosecuted by the county attorney and by the superior court, but they're never taking them to the sheriff's department to be fingerprinted. So the subject is then sentenced to more prison time for a new crime, and DOC is never, or DPS is never notified. I've attempted to reach out to the private prison, and they are not returning my calls, so we're kind of at a standstill with that. Pinal County Sheriff's Department has stated that they will work with their court liaison to make sure those people are being transported properly. That's kind of where we left off a week ago. Other than that, the process is getting better. As the word gets out there, people are communicating with us more when they're finding cases that are missing, including probation and the prosecutor's offices. But we have, I think you're going to talk a little bit about this later. We have deployed a mobile fingerprint device to one of our troopers, and it has successfully passed. And that is it's the size of a cell phone, so that the troopers can be taking fingerprints in the field in a safe manner. And the trooper does like it, so we're planning on deploying more of those. But in addition to that, we have recently come into possession and tested 2 forms of tablets. One of them is meant for the court, which is a normal tablet size, but it's got a rugged case on it with a stand, a prop-up stand, and like an armband where you could wrap it around your arm. And it's got a small connectable device to take the fingerprints, and it's virtually a live scan that's the size of a tablet. that we're encouraging for the courts to get on board with that so that they don't have to transport any longer. And then in addition, we have a more rugged laptop size device that's a live scan that will be going out. I'm not sure who that one's being deployed to, but we are working in the right direction to getting everybody the technology that they need. Obviously, anybody who wants this technology will need to pay for it, but we do have it, and it's available for agencies to communicate with us to find out what they need and what they want for us to help them with that vendor process.
I'm looking at my notes now. Thank you for that update. The issue was we're only verifying the identity of the defendant before the judge with the 2 fingerprint ID, but we're not connecting the sentencing with the criminal record, and that remains to be a gap.
Correct. And go ahead.
This is Bert Stegan from MCSO.
Yes,
What we're
go ahead.
doing on these sentencings in Superior Court, we have a live scan in Central Court, and if they are sentenced that day and going to be either incarcerated in our jail or going to prison, they get a full set of fingerprints. They come to us. We research to see if that particular charge that they are sentenced on is on the rap sheet. If it is not, we put it on the rap sheet, therefore taking care of that gap. And if not, we're just doing an O4 for identification purpose for the people that are in our jail.
Okay, so is this still a remaining issue for the task force, or I think we're seeing less people show up without fingerprints, and we're starting to see, I guess, changes being implemented that facilitate that, or is there still work that needs to be done?
The other thing that we do is a couple of the courts send us a court list the day before and check and see if they have a PCN on file that's on the rap sheet, and we go through those, send it back to the court, and if there's nothing there, that means the court will send them down here before the judge sees them that day, and then we take care of the fingerprints and get it on the rap sheet. That's not all the courts, but it's a number of them.
So I think it really is a problem we still need to address. So what you were talking about, Lloyd, was that the 2-finger ident is only pulling up a person record. It's not pulling up an incident record. I don't know where that stands as far as programming. Last time I heard it was on hold because of our ABIS upgrade last summer. Can't believe it's been a year already. So I think that that's on hold, but I don't know where that left off as far as programming. The thing that we're finding is Maricopa County is great as far as the Superior Court stuff and Bert's people. Thank you very much for all that help, Bert. DOC, anybody sentenced to prison is great. It's the ones that aren't making it to prison and not in Maricopa County that we're having a problem with. So anybody who's sentenced to probation, anybody who's just getting a fine or 2 days in jail, a lot of those are still missing us.
Okay. All right. So we'll get an update on the 2FID, pulling up the record, connecting that, and I guess begin looking at outside of Maricopa, what are some of the opportunities? And then what is the action item for the task force on the private prisons? Is there anything?
If you guys have a way of communicating with them, because like I said, they're not returning my calls at all. I would love to invite them to our statewide training so that they understand their part in the process like DOC does, but nobody's even communicating back with me. So I can't invite anybody. So if you can find a contact that's receptive to listening to you, that would be great.
Okay. I got a hand from Pinnell. Go ahead.
You're muted.
Could you also introduce yourself? Oh, we're not hearing you.
Let me post the call-in information in the chat for her. Okay, just posted the phone number and the pin in the chat if you want to try to call in.
Hi, Lloyd, can you hear me? This is Tina Wannick.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. For some reason, my phone wasn't working. So just an update. I know that Maricopa Superior Court just mentioned how they are filling in the gap for the 2FID. Are other courts have the issue where they're not getting the records back? So we are having to do that reprogramming effort. That's that phase 2 once we get the devices from the vendor, the new devices that you were talking about.
Right.
So we still do have that gap where we don't know what the defendant is being sentenced for. I just wanted to clarify that for our other remaining superior courts.
Okay, thank you.
And Lloyd Pinal mentioned in the chat that they have an email that they use to communicate with the private prisons for transport issues. So they were going to reach out. But Amber, would you mind dropping your email in the chat for them? So if they get that contact, they can send it to you. I don't know if they have your email.
If I can find the chat box, I would love to.
I can post it if you want me to.
All right, as long as I spelled my last name right, we're good.
Okay.
And then I'm not sure who that is at Pinal. It just says that it's Pinal Superior Court in Florence is your name. But if you maybe want to drop your contact info in the chat. Oh, okay, it's Odette. So if you want to drop your email in the chat so Amber could follow up with you also if needed, that would be helpful. All right, Amber, there you go. If you can find the chat.
Sorry for the signal. Any other questions? Issue. I want to jump back then to AZ Point. I don't know how to share this. Shayla, are you able to share the AZ Point data sheet? I want to go through some of the numbers.
Yeah, the most recent performance measures that we did.
That one, yes. And if you could walk them through the list. I think there's some great news, and then there's some concerns that remain that I'd like to bring up to the group. Yeah, that one. Why don't you give us a quick walkthrough, and then I'll talk about I'll highlight some of the areas that I'd like to work on.
Sure. So we did some analysis with our most recent extract that we got from the AOC. We have a few kind of key performance measures that we've been tracking since the system went live, and we wanted to kind of update those with the most recent extract. Something to note, we did a pretty heavy kind of as we've gone through this, we've had different analysts working on this. Obviously, as many of you know, initially when AZ Point went live, we had a lot of data issues. And so our team, as we kind of progress technically, and we have analysts working in different programs and they're able to query different things, we worked on this time really standardizing that process at ACJC so that now anytime we get an extract from the AOC, it doesn't matter who's working, right? We have the same querying, the same kind of logic to make sure that we're looking at the same cases. So we have standardized that internally to hopefully make this easier for us moving forward. But one of the things we looked at is just the general number of orders issued by order type and by year. Order type meaning an order of protection versus an injunction against harassment versus an injunction against workplace harassment. So you can see that over time, we've and this is to be expected, right? 2020 was COVID. We were shut down for a period of time. There were data issues. So you can see that over the last 2-3 years.
Zoom in on that a bit.
Is that better?
One more.
Okay. How about that?
That's good.
Perfect. You can see over the last 2-3 years, we've consistently been issuing more orders, or the number of orders issued has increased fairly steadily. We have some data on the service status, meaning by year and order type, how many orders are served versus unserved versus dismissed, expired. We have this modified superseded column, which essentially indicates that either a transfer order came in or a modified order came in, so that original order is superseded. So we have, I didn't have the percentages in here, did I?
It's lower in the.
Okay, but you can see that the number of orders, if you look at these kind of total, I don't know if you can see my little highlights right now, but if you look at these, the big thing I think for this group too is that even as orders are continuing to be issued more, we're also serving more. So that's a good thing from the servicing agency perspective. And the number of unserved orders remains relatively consistent over the last 3 years, even with the additional orders being issued. This group has seen this kind of chart before. One of the big things that we like to look at, and especially relevant to the NICS task force, is the number of days from issuance to service. This group was really the catalyst for the AZ Point project in general. But one of the things that you all pointed out at the beginning was that it was taking almost 23 days, that I think that was the average beforehand, by the time an order was issued and served to the time it was getting into NCIC. So as you can see here, nearly 50% of our orders are being served within the first 3 days, right? And almost 70% of our orders are being served within the first week. So we've taken that 23-day kind of window and narrowed it down to basically a week. And we know, and as Robert mentioned earlier, we're batching things to NCIC twice a day. So if you entered a declaration of service into AZ Point now, it would go into AZ Point tonight during our afternoon batch. And so we know that when service is entered here, it's getting into NCIC that same day most of the time as well. So this is really positive. Our servicing agencies are working really hard to get these orders in this, not only served, but then in the system. And we can tell that 70% of the time we're getting an order served within a week. We have this same kind of view, but broken down by year. We wanted to see if there was a difference between the years of days to service. And you can see there's not really. You can see there's a slight difference. If we're looking at that week kind of threshold, it goes from 71% in 2020 to 69% in 21 and 69% in 22. But if you remember, the number of orders being issued has increased over time. So to me, that is a positive finding here, that even though we're issuing more orders, we're still getting things served nearly 70% of the time within a week. We like to look at this days between the actual date of service versus the date that service was entered into AZ Point. There is a statute mandating that once an order is served, that service agency has 72 hours to get it entered into the system. So we wanted to discern, how how often are we hitting that threshold, right? Or more importantly, how often are we not? So we know that if you serve an order today, you have 72 hours to get that into the system. And you can see here that most of the time, and we split it up by year as well, but 90% of the time in the last 2 years, we've got that 83% in 2020. Service is being entered within that 72-hour threshold. The one thing here to note is that I think 2020 also makes sense. There was a system change, process change. And obviously, as we worked through this and we continue training and technical assistance, we're trying to make sure all servicing agencies know that responsibility and know that requirement, that 72-hour requirement. But again, just honing back to, as the number of orders being issued has continued to increase over the last 3 years, our service entered within 72 hours is also increasing. So that service not being entered within those 72 hours is decreasing. So that's a really positive finding, I think, as well. Petitions received from AZ Point. So there are many benefits to the petitioner going through AZ Point and completing their petition electronically online. They can opt into what we kind of call our victim notification system, where they can enter their email address and they get to keep up with the status of their case. The other thing is when they're entering their information online, we're capturing data. It's called the Service of Process Information Form, that they're answering questions about their case or the defendant and his whereabouts. And we're pulling that into a PDF and generating that for law enforcement to help them with service, right? So if they may not have his home address, but they know where he works or what days he works. So we're capturing that supplemental information and populating a PDF for them. Now anybody can also submit a petition via paper, right? We're not ever going to preclude someone from being able to file for an order of protection because they don't use the electronic system. So paper is still always an option. However, they miss that opportunity for being able to keep that email, kind of that connection, that notification to their case, in addition to the Service of Process Information Form. So we wanted to see how often are petitions being received from AZ Point? Yes, no. You can see here that most petitions or most courts are accepting electronic petitions. We have it broken down by order type and order year. So nothing that we wouldn't expect to see here. And then we wanted to look, Lloyd and I have talked a lot about, okay, can we identify in the data if something isn't going through AZ Point, if they're not going through that electronic process, is it less likely that their order is going to be served, right? And the thought being, we're not capturing that information needed for service at that time, right? Law enforcement doesn't then have potentially enough information to serve this individual. But when we looked at this, it's interesting. I expected this to be a lot different. I would have assumed that of the petitions received from AZ Point, those would have had a higher percentage of served, and they do, right? But those versus those that are unserved. I would have expected that anything that was petitions that didn't go through AZ Point would have a higher rate of unserved. And they do. It's slight, right? It's less than 2 percentage points, I guess a little more. But it's not as high as I would have expected. I don't think this means that if something's unserved in a petition, I don't think we can rule out that affects service. I think the quality of information that we're getting and the type of information that we're getting, I want to take a deeper dive into this data and see, okay, of the unserved orders, what only has a city? What doesn't have a city? Someone typed unknown, right? And if something gets assigned to Phoenix PD and there's an unknown, where do they even start, right? The likelihood of that order being served decreases. In my opinion, my theory is that it decreases with the less information that they have. I don't think we can make that assumption here yet. So I want to do a deeper dive, but Lloyd and I at least wanted to take a baseline look at okay, does it matter if a petition comes from AZ Point or not in terms of the likelihood that this will be served versus unserved? It does. It just doesn't vary as much as I would have expected. And then we have the breakdown by county. These numbers aren't particularly, I would like to redo these numbers and look at it from a ratio perspective. For example, if it obviously looks like Maricopa County has a ton of petitions not received from AZ Point, but this doesn't consider the volume of work that they do or the volume of cases that they issue. So I want to redo this and do that ratio based on kind of their case processing and then look at those numbers. But we did just want to break it down at a preliminary level by county to see, are there differences across counties? Is this a rural versus urban thing? Like, is there anything in the data that we can identify for even to some kind of targeted interventions if needed in places? Is there training opportunities in counties to encourage certainly the use of AZ Point, knowing that the plaintiff has a lot more options when they go through the electronic petition? And I think that's it, Lloyd. Yeah.
Can you just go back up to the top, please?
Sure.
So when we look at performance measures, we really want to track a few things. So one, from the time the judges makes the order to when it's actionable by law enforcement. So we went from that 23 plus day. We're seeing improvements over time. We're going to continue to track that. And I think with the updates that we've made, the updates that we have planned, we're going to continue to see that number drop. I think we're doing okay there. I think we're managing the flow a lot better. So I think the numbers are showing that the productivity of using the system is improving. And I think with the quality of life changes, the speed changes and the search changes, we're going to start to see that number drop over time. What's always been a concern is unserved orders, right? And as we receive, the majority of questions or complaints, issues that we have with AZ Point is really about, I can't serve this order. There's not enough information. There's or some sort of miscommunication. So we know from the data, it's about 20%, it looks like, of the orders that were issued remain unserved. There's a number of reasons why they're unserved. And that's what Shayla and I over the last year have been trying to do a better understanding. We've met with Phoenix PD. We've met with really stakeholders from around the state to try to get a better understanding of what's happening. We're trying to look at, is it, our initial thought was in the past, the plaintiff would fill out the form, get the order approved by the judge, and then would arrange service on their own. So they would go to the servicing agency. They would go to the sheriff's department or the police department, and that handoff, that in-person handoff, really facilitated a lot of information sharing that made it easier for service agencies to do the service. Moving to AZ Point, we've lost that, it's easier for the plaintiff, but that handoff also created some challenges. So as we looked at the system's performance, we wanted to get a deeper understanding. One of our thoughts was, if they're filling it out online, if they're filling it out on paper, somehow that information is not getting to the service agencies. Our initial scans and our initial analysis is showing that there isn't that much of a difference. That is, in most cases, that's happening as it should. So we're gonna dig further. We have identified some cases where there has been issues getting that information from the courts, the plaintiffs in the courts, to law enforcement. There's some technical things that we're working out, and then some process things that we've identified that hopefully will be smoothed over moving forward. But there remains a high number of orders that do not get served. And I think in the next 6 months we should have. I'm hoping we'll have clarity by then. That's sort of the task we've given Shayla and the team at our researchers, analysts, to try to give us a deeper understanding so that we can bring a group around to start addressing how do we then now fix this. So we're narrowing down the reasons why an order goes unserved. The big obvious ones that we thought turned out not to be the case. So there isn't some procedure that's systemic. There isn't a software glitch that's systemic. There isn't a disconnect that seems to be systemic. So not ready to make a decision on here's the range of things it could be. But the big obvious ones don't seem to play an issue. So I think it might be that the reasons why they're unserved, the 7,000 orders are unserved, could be 7,000 reasons why, and not necessarily a systemic or an easier fix. But we'll dig through that. We'll try to get a report the next time we bring the task force together. Questions or comments as we go through this? Open it up to the group. Odette, I see your hand raised. Was that related to this or was, okay, put it down. Paul, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Lloyd, I'm listening to the conversation and what Shayla described, and what you just shared with us. I do think that you're going to find that it's related to that initial gathering of the information. The service of process information now comes from the system itself. That's all based on the interaction of the petitioner at the front end. Where we saw our dip in our numbers of successful service prior to the statute changing in 2020, we had approximately a 70 to 74% success rate in the service of the orders that would arrive at the sheriff's office, because we had that human interaction, that human interview, if you would, that would complete the form itself. Now it's the computer doing it. And so that lends itself to the information that's going in at the front end. And so if there's improvement to be made, I think that's where we are going to have to focus about the quality of the information that's going into the service of process form, which translates into we need to do a better job of getting the information from the petitioner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that occurred to us as well. That's something we're going to explore. I think the changes we made to the petition portal, we may see some improvement there. I think getting more advocates involved where available will help with that. So there's going to be some education on our side. I think there might be an opportunity to provide the courts with some support, handout or some queuing that might assist in that. But the service of process information, it's not something that's gathered a lot oftentimes at the court side. So we know there's a gap there. At the very least, making sure that service agencies have the plaintiff's contact information, and it's an extra step for you all, but making sure that you're able to connect and fill out the service of process information if needed. Paul, you were going to do a follow-up?
Yeah, I was just going to state that the change in our success rate was drastic. It's about a 50 to 52% success rate now.
Mhm.
Numbers, when that you look at the numbers, approximately 2,000 per year prior to 2020 to approximately 6,200. Simple math tells you that we're successful more than half of the time, but that's still a lot of orders that we're not being successful with.
Mhm.
So if we're going to focus on unserved orders, then we've got to deal with the pieces that I think are right in front of us. And I'll just stress, it's the first time that we're dealing with the petitioner. So the petitioner portal, that's where I would focus.
Okay.
And Paul, you're being assigned, though, if I remember correctly, a lot more orders because now that assignment is automatic, right, based on the statute. So whereas before the plaintiff kind of got to choose who they wanted to serve their order. But if I remember correctly, in the past, we've talked about the number that you're being assigned has also increased.
Correct. In the apologize. The amount that is being assigned to us when the statute changed, all of what was coming out of Superior Court now came to the sheriff's office.
Mhm.
Previously, it was that petitioners and victims would arrive at the sheriff's public counter with their order and request our services. And so we did an interview with them and got the information that we needed to allow us to be successful.
Yeah, I think that speaks to Lloyd's point about how that handoff from the plaintiff to you is now electronic from the court to you. And so we're missing there is a gap there because the process has changed, right?
Yeah. So it is a priority for us. It's a priority for two reasons. One, plaintiff safety, of course, is number one. But really, 1A is also the cost that we're placing on service agencies, right? Not having enough information, the repeated service attempts, this is a drain on them as well. And if we can improve that, so that one, your success rate goes up, but also that you're not having to make 4 or 5 different attempts because of incomplete information or lack of really good actionable information. So yes, it is a priority. And once we get a little bit more clarity, we'll certainly put a working group and see about how we can fix this. But that handoff gap, the petition portal, make, whatever cues we need to make sure that that service of the service information is in there, and then how to prompt them to make sure that's in there. Yeah, we hear that, and again, it is a priority. Paul, you had a follow-up, or anyone else if you want to chime in?
I was only going to add that when we are talking about successful service, we look at the ratios on our end about the number of attempts that we take on. Our diligence is 3 attempts before we move on to the next one that's in the queue. So what we're finding out is that it's typically a ratio of 3 attempts to the successful one. It's a lot of work, a lot of resources that go into being able to report the successful number that we do.
Right.
And so, I do just stress that if we're going to try to impact that number, then we need to look for ways in how we're going to communicate with that petitioner on the first go. There's a lot of information that goes to the court comes in from the petitioner portal, correct? And so if we get it at the beginning, then it saves a lot of time and effort on everybody else trying to remediate the quality of the information that's coming in.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else? Hey, thank you, Shayla. That was very helpful. All right. Sasha, before we go to the call to the public, are there any other issues that folks want to bring up, opportunities? Let's do an open forum. Go ahead and unmute or raise your hands. We'll call on you, but open call to the task force members. Go ahead, Sharon.
Hi, on AZ Point, I know this is going back some time, but is it still on the table to build out so that prosecutors will have access?
Go ahead,
Great.
Shayla.
I wasn't sure if you were going to take that or not.
Okay.
Yes, I think I mentioned before when I gave the overall AZ Point update that we're kind of letting the dust settle and get through all the most recent enhancements. And then in about a month or so, we're going to reconvene with our technical team and our vendor to see, one, what do future phases look like. We do have things on the wish list. The read-only role, which I think is what Sharon's referring to, where prosecutors and probation even to an extent has requested this, but that they have access to the system and they could view and print documents, not necessarily the need to like go in and edit or do anything, but just visibility into the system. So that's definitely on the radar and something we can request in the next phase, so long as Lloyd keeps the bank open and our vendor is able to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. We are completing this major round of enhancements. So it's what we're calling AZ Point 2.0. We do recognize there's additional things that have been brought up that were not addressed. We do have fund support, or will have fund support to look at another round of enhancements. We'll probably convene the planning. I think is it a month from now? I thought it was a little longer than that. But then bring that back to the group for continual planning for that. But yes, there will be another round of enhancements.
And I think Michelle's on the call now, but one of the things we've talked about in our kind of daily meetings is one thing we weren't able to update this time. It was outside the scope of these enhancements, but kind of an overhaul of the user management tool and user accounts. And so I think that would kind of redefining the roles and what permissions and things need to be. I think that establishing that read-only role or prosecutor/probation access would fall within the scope of that requested enhancement.
Paul, go ahead.
I would just extend to the prosecutors here in Maricopa County, if they need a workaround, the sheriff's office would be willing to assist them. We'll go offline for that, but if there's an interest, please contact me.
All right. Thank you.
Paul, do you want to drop your email in the chat for Sharon, please? Thank you.
Any other issues? Okay. We'll give you folks another minute to think about, get brave enough to raise it. Hi, Michelle. Welcome to the session.
Hi.
Robert did a great job updating us, and Shayla did as well. So
You're off the
and
hook for today, Michelle.
I think so. Sasha, did we have any call to the public or request from the public to address the group?
No, we did not.
We did not. Okay. Our next convening, we'd like to do a live convening probably 4 months from now in the Tucson area down south. We'll look at possible hosts if you are down in that area and would love to host a live task force meeting. Please let Shayla or Sasha know, and we'll coordinate with you for that. Last chance for questions, issues for the group.
Just one thing.
Yes.
Paul, I don't think your email was pasted into the chat. It was just your name. If you want to throw that in there before we hop off. And then I posted my email in there as well. So if anyone has any follow-ups or would like to host in Tucson, my email is there. Feel free to reach out.
Great.
Thank you, Paul.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll give you back your 49 minutes. We appreciate you. If you're up here at the Law Enforcement Summit, please stop by and say hi. We will have a commission table out there. I think Shayla is heading up to man that. We'd love to talk with you informally. Great. Thank you, everyone. We'll call this meeting to a close.
Thank you.